Holy Roman Empire is kind of not really, and it's not really holy, not really Roman, and not really an empire, but it's the closest thing they have. All right. Invading peoples. So during the Middle Age kingdom, Europe experienced a second wave of invasions. All right. So yeah, you had the Huns come in there, and you had this is like well before when Rome was fallen, and a variety of other Germanic tribes just decimating Rome. Now you have a second wave coming in. All right. This is during like the you know 600s, 800s, 900s. Okay. The Magyars, this is why I had you guys do this in the map. They're the ones that are in green in this, and the Magyars are pushing into what we know as France and the Alps and into Rome and even into the Byzantine Empire. But they'll do their little push, and then they'll eventually kind of leave. The really ones, a big effect are the Vikings, but I'll get to them in a moment. The Angles, the Saxons, and the Celts are the ones coming from. You see, they're not on this map, but they would be where that right above Germany. They'd be in like or that area there, and they're going to go into England. So if you have any ancestry from England, you are of Anglo-Saxon descent, and this is how England gets its name. It's the land of the Angles. England, 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 land of the Angles. That's where it comes from, right? So, but they're a Germanic tribe. Again, Germanic tribe is just a coined term for anybody that's not basically Roman, but even though Rome's gone at this point. The Muslims, as we talked about, now keep in mind they had been getting their start since 622 and consistently pushing through. I mean, really this is only 200 years later, but they have all the Arabian Peninsula. You can't see all of it. They have all of Northern Africa, which you can see. And they have Spain, and they're constantly pushing and pushing. Even Corsica, Sardinia, and Sicily are under occupation, of the Muslims. So they're pushing into Europe. And then you have the ones that probably made the most resounding impact are the Vikings. The Vikings come from up there in Scandinavia, which you see in purple. Now they will go into Russia. So Russia has their roots in the Vikings. Like they have Viking roots in them, like Viking blood in the. If you're a Russian today, you have Viking blood in you. Parts they get into Germany. They definitely 100% get into England, also known as England, land of the Angles. They get into Paris, and they decide to go all the way around and get into the Mediterranean. They also decide to go into Ireland. They also decide to go into Iceland. You can't see it. They also go to Greenland, and then you also can't see it, but they also go into North America, up into Canada, newfound land, and more of the invading peoples. Like I showed you here, you have the Angles and Saxons. All right, they're in the 400 JD. They're going to migrate to England. They're going to convert to Christianity, and they all adopt liturgy. All right, the Angles, the Saxons settle in England, land of the Angles. The Celts settle Ireland. That's why the Celtic people, or the Celtics. The most famous of these people, because they bring Christianity, arrived in the British Isles through the efforts of missionaries. So missionaries are bringing Christianity to these different regions. Is St. Patrick. St. Patrick brings Christianity to Ireland. That's why St. Paddy's Day and so on and so forth. All that good stuff. Why it's green in Ireland. If you've ever been to Ireland, it's just ridiculously green. But that's why St. Patrick is famous. He brought Christianity to Ireland. Write that down. The poem Beowulf was likely written by the Anglo-Saxon people as a heroic deed. All right, so Beowulf tells a tale of the guy, protagonist being Beowulf, and his encounter with monsters on a quest for glory and power. All right, that's a piece of literacy there that you will have to know. Beowulf is like the Anglo-Saxon legend. Yeah, well, they'll go into England and they'll set up in Northumbria and Mercia and East Anglia, Wessex and Kent. And the Magyars come in about 700s to 1,000, just consistently raiding in that area. They're going to come from Asia, and guess what? They're going to be really good on horses and really good at shooting arrows. So they're primarily from the country called Hungary. I know you're probably getting very hungry right now. So they would make raids into Western Europe, capturing people to sell into slavery. So they would like raid a little bit, get some people, and then sell them into slavery, and then come back. They weren't really staying. The Magyars didn't really stay, but they were causing havoc throughout Europe. So they never really settled, but they impacted Germany, France, and Italy. Like they're just constantly coming in and impacting them. The Muslims will come in the 700, and they'll occupy Spain from 700 to 1492. Spanish Muslims are called, that's right, they're called Moors. Good job, class. Very good. Excellent work. So the Muslims spread their caliphates, meaning the caliph spreads their empire, like an emperor has an empire. A caliph or caliph has a caliphate, which they started in the Arabian Peninsula, as we've already learned. So after the battle tours, Muslims mostly impacted Europe through foreign trade. They stopped after that. Okay, Muslims during the Middle Ages in Western Europe were often called Moors. In Europe, if you're a Muslim, the Vikings. So let's talk about the Vikings. So we see Scandinavia, and they just literally went everywhere. They are amazing traders. They're amazing warriors and travelers. Like they're all these things. Like they were just excited to like see what's over here. Well, what happens if we go further west? What happens if we go north? What happens if we go east? What if we have to go down this river, or sail across this sea, or sail across this ocean? What's this new land? They're looking, yes, for a variety of things. They're looking for freedom from maybe you'll see that some of them leave to get a better life from freedom from some of these kings and earls. Some of them leave for just better soil, better, rich, fertile land. Some are looking for adventure. Some are looking to trade. So that they're just all these things into one, and they have heavily influenced Europe even to this day. Ireland and England they get into, and they get into Paris, and they get into the Mediterranean, all over. So the Vikings, like I said, are from 700 to 1000 is like their primary years. Like 800, 900 is like ideal, that 100-year period. The Vikings will raid England, okay? That first attack on the monastery in England is the first kind of glimpse into these Vikings that just kind of come in there, just destroy all these defenseless monks. And they just like, oh, this is really easy. Let me just go kill these monks, take all this gold and jewelry, and just sail back to Scandinavia. That's what they did. They had small raiding parties at first, but as the time goes on, they start raiding parties become armies. That's kind of how it sets up. You don't just consistently keep raiding. You raid, you raid, you raid, and then you're like, well, let's just actually attack them. And that's what they did. And they'll control England. They'll be polytheistic, meaning they'll believe in God, multiple gods, Thor, Odin, Freya, Loki, gods like that. But they'll later turn into Christianity. They'll later be influenced by the people that they've conquered, okay, or the people they've traded with. So you can get religions in a variety of ways, okay, and many of them switched. So like I said, what's in red, you would want to write about the Vikings. It's the lack of arable land led to exploration and invasion. That's why they wanted to do, that's why they wanted to keep leaving. Well, it will disrupt trade, towns will decline, Viking attacks contribute to the collapse of the Frankish Empire. So that's what I was kind of leading to. The Vikings will collapse the Frankish Empire. Like they're already splitting up. The reason that there's so many castles and so forth is because you have to have protection from these Magyars, the Muslims, and Vikings. So the best way was build a giant castle, have people pile into it whenever the Vikings came, and just hold out. You could hold out for a long time in these castles. Okay, but Charlemagne constantly struggled with these Vikings. Okay, so much so that throughout much of the Frankish history, they'll be giving land to the Vikings. It's like, hey, don't attack us. We'll give you some land that we already owned, but when we need you, you need to attack other Vikings. So Vikings were more than happy to do this. Vikings will settle in areas known today as Russia, Iceland, Greenland, and briefly North America. You want to make sure that the Vikings come from Scandinavia. Write that down if you haven't done that. That's what you've been doing the maps on. They're sometimes referred to as Norsemen or Northmen, because guess what? They came from the north. They came from the north. Those are the people that were getting attacked by them. Like, these Northmen. They're from the north. They're not very creative. They were great sailors, and they did long ships. The reason they're so effective, they're able to navigate the high seas. oceans and go up rivers, because underneath it doesn't go down into the water very much. It's more flat. Okay, it's like slightly angled on the bottom. There's long ships. Yeah, but they'll convert to Christianity. You don't have to know this, but it's interesting to know that Eric the Red will discover Iceland and Greenland. And yes, Iceland it's not actually full of ice, and Greenland is not actually green, but if you know the size differential, you know why he did it. He named it Iceland because he didn't want people going there because it was so rich and fertile, and really didn't have a whole lot of ice, and he wanted people to go to Greenland and say, hey, go to this other place. It's not actually green. It's full of ice. And then Leif Erikson discovered North America 500 years before Columbus. 500 years before Columbus. So, how did invasions by the Angles, the Saxons, the Magyars, the Vikings influence the development of Europe? Well, invasions by the Angles and the Saxons and the Magyars and the Vikings will disrupt the social and economic and political order of Europe. So every time they're trying to get out of this dark age, all these different invading peoples just push them right back into it, right? Manors with castles provide protection from invaders. That's why manors and castles become an actual thing. Like Rome didn't need castles. They didn't need castles like this because they had Roman legions. They had Roman armies ready and willing to go fight and push out there at a moment's notice. You had your castle on wheels, basically, with them. We'll talk about the reinforcing the feudal system. Okay, that'll be in the next episode. Invasions will disrupt trade, and towns will decline, and the feudal system will be strengthened, like I said. Okay. Just some things to note. After the death of Charlemagne, organized government disappears. Like I said, he's the only one trying to pull them out. And unfortunately, he was one of the strong, charismatic leaders that was able to do it for a little while, for his reign. But his successors could not live up to that level of excellence. They couldn't. Europe became ruled by independent leaders. So again, pocket kingdoms. The decline of Roman influence in Western Europe, invasions of barbarians, tribes left people with little protection. Okay, the only thing they can have, they didn't have any. There's no Roman Empire to protect them. There's no Holy Roman Empire. There's not much of anything. So they entered feudal agreements with landholding lords to promise them protection. That's basically if your landlord is like, hey, you can live on the land, pay me rent, then if anybody attacks you, I'll defend you. Right? And that's where we'll leave off. You thought the lesson was over, but it's only begun. Now in between the pages. Welcome to Between the Pages. Alrighty then. So, I'm going to dive into 3 different Vikings. Alright, the first one is Harold Bluetooth. He's the king of Denmark between about 958 and 686 AD. Now, the reason I've chosen him to kind of go between the pages is because it's an interesting story. So you hear the name Bluetooth and you think, well, what's that? Well, there is the Bluetooth that you know came from him. Now, what he did is he united Scandinavia, right? And the reason that, you're like, well, why does that make a difference? Who cares? One of the people that were setting up engineers and so forth that were setting up software engineers are setting up Bluetooth was reading through the Viking sagas and encountered this guy named Harold Bluetooth, and he united all of Scandinavia. And so the thought process was, this will be, us connecting PC to cell phones and cell phones and things like that wirelessly, bringing them together. And it was meant just as a temporary name, but it stuck. And the symbol that you see for Bluetooth is the runic inscription of an H and of a B combined. And that has been the runic inscription of Bluetooth. And it was the reason they called him Bluetooth. Allegedly, he had a Bluetooth. because of like a rotted tooth. So those of you who don't brush your teeth, expect to be called maybe Bluetooth. Who knows? All right. So that's how Bluetooth came around. So when you see that Bluetooth symbol, that's an H and a B for Harold Bluetooth. All right. So there's history in everything and reason and purpose behind most of everything that's out there. You just need to know where to look. The second Viking that I'm going to talk about is Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar Lothbrok, maybe you've seen the TV series Vikings. He is the star of that series. Now, he becomes famous for in the Icelandic sagas. There's the whole saga book that we have, uncovered that talks not in great detail, but enough detail that we have, a good bit of information on him. What he is kind of famous for is for trying to. He's not the first person to attack like France and Britain, but he's really the one that tried to settle it. So he was kind of terrorizing France and terrorizing Britain and terrorizing Ireland. This Viking, this like mythical, almost mythical character in Viking lore. He's really the first person to control it and want to settle there permanently. Now, he does die in a pit of snakes, allegedly. Also, some people are other accounts of him escaping that or not having that at all and then going and conquering Ireland. So we don't really know that. But what we do know is that he had 3 legendary sons. One was Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. All right, those 3 will become the legendary sons of Ragnar Lothbrok. All right, but he is the leader that kind of starts this whole epic of raiding different places. And some historians say he's not real. Other ones say he definitely is. So I like to believe that he is, especially if we know that his sons Ragnar were Ivar and Sigurd and Bjorn, right? But he will get to the point. He'll even attack allegedly Paris as well. And what kind of happens in that? Basically, you have Charles the Bald. Remember Charles the Bald, one of the sons of Charlemagne, or grandsons of Charlemagne, and he decides that I'm tired of fighting Vikings. We can't do it anymore. They're just so savage and just ruthless. We're going to pay you. We're going to pay you 7,000 pounds of silver, which I don't know what that would equate to. Probably millions and millions of dollars. Just don't attack us. Here's money. Don't attack us. So you see that a lot. A lot of French will start to pay off Vikings to not attack them or to give them land and say, hey, protect us when other Vikings do that, because we'll talk about that soon. But if you want to look more into Ragnar Lothbrok, you want to look into the TV show Vikings. Will give you a good depiction of that. The last one I'm sure you're familiar with is Thor. Now, Thor is not an actual Viking. He is an Aesir. Aesir, however you Aesir god, if you want to think of it like that. Okay. He is the god of thunder and lightning. This is where we get Thursday, also known as Thor's Day. Days of the week, typically they're named after Vikings or some Roman. His father would be Odin. This is where we get Wednesday. Woden. Woden's Day. Wednesday. He is Norse mythology. What he's known for, yes, lightning and thunder, but he's also known for having an insatiable appetite. He could just eat and drink for days. It just could not be quenched. His hammer that you see probably in the movies is called Mjolnir. Mjolnir is that epic hammer that he could fling across, all parts of wherever, and it would come right back to him, because that's an actual belief of the Vikings. He's this legendary warrior god, I should say. And he did fight in places like Jotunheim. Jotunheim, there are different ones. If you know the Viking mythology, there's 9 realms or 9 worlds that are all on this tree, Yggdrasil. And he's kind of keeping them in line. And one of their arch nemesis is Jotunheim. Okay? Very interesting kind of character. of the Viking lore. So it's been a real quick between the pages, just on some Viking god and two other individuals, two other Viking legends. Alrighty, thank you for joining me from Between the Pages. Episode 19 of Shankism. This has been the early Middle Ages, part 1. We talked about invading peoples. We talked about like the Vikings, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, Magyars, Muslims, and we talked about Charlemagne, the big guy, for sure. He was also 6'4", just duly noted. Talked about his father, Pepin the Short. Talked about Pepin's father, Charles Martel, defeating the Moors in the Battle of Tours. Alrighty, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have an excellent, excellent night.